Food is all around us. Maybe it's something that grows naturally, and you think, well, obviously, I didn't cultivate that, so therefore that can't be edible. You need to have a variety of what people are familiar with. So you need to have the tomatoes, you need to have the cabbage, you need to have those type of things, but then you also throw in a couple things, and they're like, well, what is that? And we say, oh, well, I'm glad you asked. This is what it is. Here, would you like to just taste a little bit of it?
Welcome to Ecophonia. If saving the planet sounds a little bit daunting, it is. I feel that way too, so I'm talking to experts across industries and across the country to get to the root of how change is really made, in order to help you learn ways to make the world a better place. I'm here to investigate what really makes the biggest impact, and to connect you with real people who already have their feet on the ground. Today's episode is a fun one. I went out to Unearthing Farm and Market, a hyper-local urban farm located within the city of Atlanta. They keep animals, grow food, compost, have a community fridge, among many other things. This episode actually has two parts. The first part is my interview with Katie Kissel, one of the co-chairs of the board of directors. We talk about building community, and she actually eats a dandelion in front of me, and that's actually really cool because they're actually really great greens. The second part is an actual tour around the farm, and you can check the chapters to see where that part starts. To kick off this interview, I asked Katie how she got involved with the farm in the first place.
At the time that Unearthing kind of came into be, I was president of the Kirkwood Neighbors organization, and I happened to live very close. The farm or the property is literally my backyard opens up to it. So I do have a pretty long history in agriculture. My mom married a farmer when I was younger, and I spent about 10 years in the food ingredient industry. So understanding like food supply chains from a global scale. And then have spent the last 5 years or so more in the nonprofit industry. So originally when the farm came to be, it came to be because there were these two people. They had the financial backing of a foundation that was related to a property management company that was right here next to the farm. And they wrote this beautiful community-centered grant proposal to the USDA, and they got it. The one thing is once they got the grant, then they had to go find the community that they talked about in their proposal. And so again, at the time, someone had recommended me since I was so close by, and because of my very deep involvement with the neighborhood, that I would be a good fit to kind of help them, pull that community together.
You were approached about this. What were the initial feelings? And then we'll get to how you feel about it now.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was initially approached, there was definitely some red flags. I said, you wrote a grant about the community, but you really don't have any community ties. And your foundation that you're representing is really financially, and mostly, the people pulling the purse strings are older white men, and they really represent a corporation. This does not seem like the makings of something great. But at the time, I said, well, you have the money in hand, and the farm is going to exist in my backyard, whether I like it or not. And so my choice was either to get involved and make it as community-centered as possible, or, stay away from it completely. And I chose to get involved.
So we'll get into the community, but you were approached, they have this grant. What was the kind of vision they had for this grant? Because you mentioned this sort of disjoint, right? Because they're kind of this corporate looking thing, and they're trying to build a community. So what was it exactly, and what did they want?
Yeah, and just to be clear, the two women who wrote the grant, I think, later recognized that there was probably some problematic things, but they were extremely well-intentioned with what they did. And in fact, if we want to look just empirically, what happened because of what they did, the results were very good. It's just, kind of all the things in between there. But yeah, they had written this beautiful grant that talked a lot about food deserts, and it was the kind of the connection and the idea for the property as it was to create a small scale production farm that produced the max amount of food possible to feed the immediate community. Now, there was a couple of things that happened in the meantime that, like, during this period, for example, we ended up getting a grocery store down the street. Lidl came into the neighborhood, which changed things a little bit for us, right? But even if that hadn't happened, I think that, through the process of this and the learning of it, we really came to realize that, you know, ultimately having production farming, inside the city limits was limited in its scope. But that being said, their grant was centered around having people of historically marginalized communities, people in the communities that were being pushed out at the time, because Kirkwood is what I would call now a heavily gentrified area. At the time, I think maybe it was a little still gentrifying, and kind of bringing all these people together around food. So the grant was a beautiful vision, and really there are still significant portions of that vision that we incorporate today. But just like anything else, it was an innovation grant at the time. So, anytime that you innovate and you're trying something new, you're going to learn things along the way. And so we definitely have, and I feel like we put those into good use.
Of course, because especially when you're starting something, you don't know what you don't know. So you really want to try something, but you don't know until you get your hands dirty,
Yeah, exactly.
So
literally and figuratively.
let's talk about what you guys do, how you've sort of built what you've built and what you guys do here.
Yeah. So, again, initially this project was founded through a USDA reimbursement grant. The initial funds for it came from the foundation that was supported by the apartment complex. And to be very clear, the apartment complex and the foundation were extremely supportive in the beginning and actually more than matched the funds that the USDA was providing us with. And so we were able to take a piece of land. We're on about 3 acres here in the heart of Atlanta. We're just a couple miles from downtown, from the Capitol building. We're right along the 21 bus line, the MARTA route, and turn it into something that is usable and really the best use case, because interestingly enough, when they wrote the grant, they didn't know this, but we are sitting on a FEMA designated floodway, which means that we are unable to build any commercial or residential on this property.
Cool. So you've been here for pretty much the entire length of the farm. How have you seen it change over the years that you've kind of been here?
Yeah, of course, like when I, first moved to the neighborhood, gosh, that was 12 years ago already. This land was completely overrun with invasives. Everyone assumed that the land was mostly wooded because you could only see the trees along the outside. But really, once you got into the center part, the kudzu and everything had completely decimated any kind of old growth hardwood that would have been in the center of this property. And so just from the process of kind of pulling that out, we brought in on our first winter 150 goats on property that made very short work of the kudzu. They did their jobs well. So seeing that change initially was really striking. And so we start from kind of this very bare bones. The one thing about invasives and kudzu was brought in as a way to help with erosion, right? Because it's very quickly spreading. The problem is, like with many invasives, it actually doesn't help. It actually hurts, because what it does is it chokes out anything that is native that might have a really deep root system. And kudzu has a very shallow root system. So water is able to flow through pretty quickly. And when we first, cleared everything, it was very obvious to us why this was FEMA designated floodways. Anytime it would get a halfway decent rain, we'd come on property and it was like a lake. And so that was kind of the challenge that we faced initially. Luckily, one of our initial partners was a landscaping company called Community Foodscapes. They still have their nursery on site to this day. And they, Mike McCord, who's the owner of that company, who's a former Trees Atlanta guy, who has a degree in agriculture, one of his specialties outside of native and edible landscaping is that he is really great with like water management and water runoff. And so we were able to create things like bioswales strategically along the property to help bring the water together. And then plant a lot of great native grasses that ultimately was able to get us to pull the water down and maintain a lot of our water on site.
So I'm actually going to pause the interview for just a second because you may have been hearing these loud birds in the background. Check this out. I'm just curious. Can you explain to me what you just did?
I made a sound that's somewhat terribly like an owl.
Uh-huh.
And those were crows or blackbirds.
Yeah.
And they don't like owls. They're predators.
I was debating cutting that part out of the interview, but I actually just think it's really cool. I'm from the city and I am unfamiliar with bird cults, so I thought Katie's knowledge of how to scare them off was just super neat. So anyway, back to the interview. So have you found that the measures you've taken to mitigate, to control the water here?
Yeah, mitigate is a perfect word for that. Yes, those measures have been excellent. You can come on this property after the heaviest rain, and you will see that within an hour or two, everything is pretty easy to walk on. We don't really have any issues. So I think it's really a testament to how good native and non-invasive, water mitigation works if you're just willing to let it work. And the big thing and the problem that a lot of people run into is they want a solution that you come in and today it's this bad and tomorrow it's perfect, right? But if you're willing to wait and let things grow, you can find that things, really do, nature does what it's supposed to do.
So, I mean, actually, you had mentioned earlier, like walking around the farm, and I'd love to do that. But just before that, could you kind of explain what you have here on the farm and like what you guys like just do, like literally?
Yeah, let me explain our process because there's a lot going on. You probably, and I don't know how to necessarily frame this, but today is the first day of our spring internship cohort. This will be our fourth cohort. So it's one full year since the beginning of this partnership. We do this partnership with Tixie Fowler, who has her nonprofit Gardens for Growing Communities. And essentially what we do is an 8 to 10 week internship process. The interns are high school interns. They get paid $12.50 an hour to come out here on Saturdays, learn about farming. They do a little bit of work while they're learning. They learn about everything. I generally do the animal husbandry section. They learn about composting. They learn about vermiculture. They learn about planting and harvesting and just kind of the whole process of how you can farm in sustainable ways. They also they learn about herbs. They learn about plant identification. So it's a really great program that we're so excited to have. In addition, and not only do we have the opportunity to pay the interns, once the interns graduate from the program, we invite them back to be intern assistants. And they get a promotion when they do that. They get a little pay raise to help with our current class of interns. And so we continue to see this go throughout the years and throughout time. And now, after last year, I guess at the end of this year, we had our biggest cohort yet. So we had 14 students that we extended offers to. We had many, many more that we had to sadly turn away. But the great thing about it is that now we have like 40 or 50 students that have come through this program, or that are come through or coming through this program at Unearthing Farm. And so we're so excited to be cultivating their young minds with agriculture and with more specifically sustainable agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. There's a lot to talk about there. But I guess for my first question is, why is it so important to like engage high school students and like young people, I guess in general, on agriculture and sustainable agriculture?
Well, especially in the city, I mentioned earlier that my mother married a farmer, right? So I kind of grew up with it already. It was something that was going to be, a part of me no matter what. But that's not true for most kids, whether they're in urban or rural or suburban areas. And so what we see is that people are very disconnected from their food. And there's almost this sense of mystery about what they're eating and why they're eating it. And, from that, you can see if I'm going to call someone out, if anyone's ever seen The Food Babe, definitely tell her, this for me, because you see a lot of people that are out there on social media and on the internet spreading a lot of misinformation about food and where it comes from. And people are easily manipulated by that because they don't have a basic understanding of our food and where it comes from.
What do you think is like the biggest misconception people have that you've seen?
Oh, there's so many. You're asking me to pick one?
Or a couple?
There is definitely a misconception about simultaneously how easy and how difficult it is to grow food. Okay, so growing food is hard, partially because the food that we now eat, that we have been trained to eat, is not something that is necessarily like natural to our environment. And so, in that sense, going against the weather and our day-to-day, commitments and having to be consistent with things, it's difficult, especially when you don't have all of this modern equipment to help you make sure that you're doing things properly. That being said, food is all around us. And if we understand what we can and can't eat, and how things necessarily aren't bad just because they have a little spot on it, or just because maybe it's something that grows naturally and you think, well, obviously, I didn't cultivate that, so therefore that can't be edible. I think that is something that we need to learn more of. We also need to learn to adjust our diets based on seasons and based on what's available. And so I think we need to teach people both of those things. That if you're trying to consistently grow things, certain items, all times of year, that is really hard. And, on some things we have to do that, and that's okay. But at the same time, there is a lot of food that's available that maybe we're not taking advantage of because we have these misconceptions about what is good to eat and what isn't.
Do you have some examples of maybe some of those foods that you guys grow here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you right now, I see some dandelions, here, some dandelion leaves and dandelions are actually really great greens. We also have curly dock, which is a lot of people consider a weed, but it's very edible and has very good, it's very good greens. that you can eat. That's so good. And we actually will sell curly dock. We don't do dandelions as much, but we have more dandelions now than we have. So maybe we'll start with that. We sell curly dock as one of our greens at the market. In addition to that, we grow a lot of different herbs. We grow things that maybe people wouldn't normally expect. One of the things that went really well was something called holy basil on the farm. So it's a type of basil that really almost has like it's kind of like this in terms of the taste profile, has this cross between like a mint and a basil. It's delicious. It went gangbusters on the farm a couple years ago. And it's something that's actually very common in India. It's called tulsi. And, because that was what was available, we were able to like introduce a lot of people to that product, and they loved it. It went really good. We went and did a partnership with El Tesoro. They made an amazing garden gimlet with it. And so, I think that would be, just a couple of examples of things that we've had on the farm. And sometimes we sell stuff, and even if it is like, has a little spot on it or whatever, we say, hey, like, that's okay. We got it here. This is still really good to eat. Don't be afraid of things because they don't look picture perfect.
That's awesome. Do you guys run into problems where like, okay, dandelions are great to eat, but people don't want to eat dandelions because they have a like misconception like, oh, it's a weed, or this thing's a weed, or like, how do you tackle people who may be adverse to eating things that they are unfamiliar with?
Well, I mean, I eat things in front of people all the time, but the biggest way that we are able to do that is by having what I call gateway foods. Yes. So I was like, it's like the drug thing. Yeah. It's gateway foods. So you need to have a variety of what people are familiar with. So you need to have the tomatoes, you need to have the cabbage, you need to have those type of things. But then you also like throw in a couple things, and they're like, well, what is that? And we say, oh, well, I'm glad you asked. This is what it is. Here, would you like to just taste a little bit of it? And that generally is all it takes. And they're like, wow, this is so great. And that's what we want people's experience with food to really be about. And the great thing about that is it's better for you as a person consuming that food, because the closer you are to the time an item is picked until you eat it, the more nutritional content you're getting. So as soon as I pick this dandelion, right? It is currently, as I hold it here, unless I were to like flash freeze it, right? That tends to like hold in nutrition. It is starting to break down. It is starting to wilt. There is nutritional value that is being lost. And generally speaking, the stuff that we buy in grocery stores, let's say, it's something that's out of season. So it's grown in California or Florida. And first of all, they have to pick it early. So it's green on the vine, and then it ripens off the vine. Well, when they pick it early, it hasn't gained its full nutritional content at that point. Also, as it is transporting, it is actively like losing nutritional content. And not to mention, the things are grown specifically for their size, because weight is important, for the way they look, okay, because that is important, for how well they hold up, because that is important, all to the capitalism side of selling groceries. The one thing they are not growing them for is increased nutritional content. Really, in order to get that, what you need is a lot of variety in your soil and the things that are grown and grown together. And yeah, those are things that you only really find in like small scale production. And then in addition to the fact that, things that are grown closer to your home are better for you and your body, it's also better for the environment. Because these things, we're not using pesticides or herbicides on our farm. We are not certified organic because I don't want to pay for that. But we are using organic practices, so you know your food is safe. And secondly, it did not have to be transported from California or Florida or India or Nigeria or China, which is a lot of where this stuff is being grown. We have a lot of produce, obviously, that's grown here in the States. We have stuff that's grown in Mexico that is then transported. All of those things are harmful to the environment in their own way. And I don't want to, I'm not someone who advocates for an all or nothing type of system. I do think that large scale agriculture is important to our society and to our food systems, mostly for a food security standpoint. But the fact that we only rely on it is actually very unsecure for us from our food security standpoint, and it's not healthy for us.
I love that you brought that up, because I guess kind of my follow-up question is obviously there's a lot of benefits to the local stuff, because you mentioned better for your body, as locally it's better nutritionally, it's it's better for it's all the things that are better, but we still need the big food systems. But how do you truly balance it? Because I don't know. I know of you guys, I know of a couple other kind of guys who have similar missions to you, but if I'm, a regular person and I want to eat more locally, maybe not go full local, because it's obviously, like you said, there's challenges with that.
So let's say you want to eat local, right? Of course, a great place to start is your local farmers market, right? And we have Community Farmers Market, which is a organization in Atlanta that supports farmers markets across the city. So they support the Grant Park Farmers Market, the Freedom Farmers Market, the East Atlanta Farmers Market. There's one in Oakhurst as well. So, you have a variety of those to choose from. But there's a problem. And the problem is, well, A, it's only available one day a week. Okay. The other problem with that is the cost. It costs farmers to come and sell at those markets for good reason. That's part of their sustainability model, right? And it costs farmers not only to pay to be at those markets, but it costs their labor to sit there and sell the product for however many hours they're going to be available. And it's small scale stuff. There's a lot of risk involved. I mentioned the risk with farmers markets. So you have to sell the product at such a cost in order to sustain the farmer's livelihood that is not attainable for most people, especially now when the cost of living is so high and the average income is so low comparatively. And so one of the things that we have done here to address that is that we do buy wholesale from farmers in the area because we don't grow enough here. That's kind of the transition that we made. We don't grow enough here, and we don't try to grow enough here to sustain the demand. What we do is we bring from other farmers, but we don't require them to sit here and maintain a stand all day, right? We give that service to them. And so, unfortunately for a lot of grocery stores, they are in such a way that they need to buy from a distributor. Well, these distributors will also buy from these farmers as well. But the problem, again, is now you have this for-profit distributor that's in the middle, and they're taking a fair amount of their cut as well, because they also have risks that they have to manage. So by having these kind of nonprofit act as the intermediary, then we're able to kind of help with that. And of course, with us, we do our market, and our fridge is available at a pay what you can, take what you need, and no one is turned away for lack of funds basis. That's what we raise money for, is for people to be able to have this locally grown, healthy, nutritious product at a price that they can afford. And, it works. It works for us on the scale that we have. We would love to have more funds and to be able to do this more and expand what we're doing, and potentially have other sites like this one where we're able to kind of act as a distribution point for people. But, it's one thing at a time.
So much to talk about.
Yeah.
So like, can we talk more about your market and your fridge? And I mean, you've touched on how they work, but more like, I guess, more about what they are.
Yeah. So it's really important to us that everyone here at the farm, their contributions are treated equally. And when we say contributions, we say, volunteering is a contribution, donating is a contribution, buying at the fridge, and paying more than maybe what market price is, that's a contribution. Taking food that you need to feed your body and you're not able to pay for it, that's a contribution. And so it's important to us that everybody's contributions come here equally. And one of the reasons for that is what you see in a lot of nonprofit and like charity type work is you see the givers and the takers. And there is just this real imbalance there in the terms of the mental and emotional toll that takes from people of need and kind of the uh kind of the emotional hierarchy that it feels like, oh, I feel like such a good person because I'm giving, and yeah, there's just this real inequity in that. And so the goal here is that when people come on the farm, they're interacting with people of all different races, religions, socioeconomic statuses, and that we all are just kind of coming here together under this one idea, and no one is a giver and no one is a taker, and we're all just like enjoying the space together. So that's what pay what you can and take what you need means to us. And, from kind of a how it works standpoint, so currently we have one market a month. We have a really great, a very reasonably sized social media following. We also have a newsletter that people can sign up for, and we're right on Memorial Drive. So people will drive by and they're like, what is this place? I kind of like to think of it as like my own little secret garden. It definitely has grown organically in the sense that we have not tried to become, Instagram famous. You won't see us like doing like funny TikTok videos or anything like that. Because we want to make sure that we have this great balance of people, that it's not, more givers and takers, and it's really important to what we do. So, we have the market once a month. We would love to do more. I tell people all it takes is $500. So if we can get $500 more in monthly donors, we can add and we can go to 200 or 2 markets a month, and so on and so forth. And then what we do is the leftovers from like a particular market are then put in our fridge, and then people are able to use the QR code on the fridge to come and pay if they need. And again, if they just need to take enough food to eat and they're not able to pay, that's okay as well. What we find is that in our market, we see a lot more people who pay market price or above, and that in our fridge stock, we see a lot more people who take what they need. So, that it balances itself out in that measure. When we obviously, the stuff that we buy at market for the first of the month is not going to last us through the entire month. So throughout the month, we may take some contributions. We do offer some like non-local produce as well, specifically stuff like if your grocery store was to get too many squash that they would not be able to take, they go through different like food distribution networks to make sure that is taken care of, and that food doesn't go to waste. So we're plugged in to several of those networks, and we label it to say, hey, this is non-local produce, but it's free to take, and we ask that people, take what they need of that, just because we know that there are people in our community that just need to eat, like, period. And so we want to make sure that we always have something for them.
How do you go about establishing these partnerships? Because clearly, well, you're taking in food, but then you mentioned working with El Tesoro, and you've like mentioned, working with other people for the water. Like, how do you build your partnerships with other organizations or other people or just others in general?
I mean, it's a variety of things, right? We do have a working board that everybody kind of comes and pitches in and brings their own networks to the table. But we also have, volunteers who come on site who, might have people that they connect us with. I'm very active in the community, and so people know me and folks reach out pretty consistently for that. I usually have more partnership opportunities than I have availability to handle by nature of where we are located, I think, as well as just, our working board existing in the space. I really would love that someday I have this big dream of having an admin, and then maybe I could, do a little bit more. So, finding partnerships is not usually our issue.
So then I guess how do you pick which ones you want to do, like to fully pursue?
Time and availability is always a big thing. So for us, it's how much is this going to take of our capacity, and is the return on the investment worth it? I mean, you basically have to make that kind of calculation. Otherwise, and you have to focus, right? Because it would be great to do a lot of different things, but you have to really just try your best to stick to the mission. And our mission is to educate and seed people in a sustainable way, all while maintaining a free and open community green space, while we only host our markets, on certain Saturdays of the month. We may host like different volunteer days and things like that throughout the month. We are open to the public anytime during daylight hours. People are welcome to come here, to walk around, to enjoy the space, to bring their coffee and sit. Some people you'll see with their laptops and doing some work. So yeah, we encourage people to be here as much as possible. We want to maintain that open green space.
That's awesome. So like you mentioned having a variety of people you want to bring together. You're all open to the public. What has the response to that been? Have you found that you guys have built it sounds like you've built a great community, but how has that gone for you?
Yeah, I mean, it really has gone well. My first dive into community work in Atlanta was I was the public safety liaison for the Kirkwood Neighbors organization. And, through that, I learned a lot about what public safety means. People have this idea that public safety means cameras and fences and, lights and security. And not that those things aren't, can't be important at times, but really the biggest thing that you can do to make a place safe is to fill it with people. And so the more people that you bring together, and people doing things that are healthy and productive. And so by nature of the space, people do things healthy and productive here. We've had a couple of instances of people not doing things healthy and productive here, and we asked them to leave, and it's generally been just that. But for the most part, people don't want to do unhealthy and unproductive things next to people doing healthy and productive things. They want to find either empty spaces or spaces with the other people doing unhealthy and unproductive things. So that's the way it works, and that is how we have managed our space.
Do you have any great success stories from on the farm?
So many, but when you say that, the first thing that comes to mind was our anniversary party last year, and it was raining, and we're like, we can't reschedule this. Like we need to go ahead and move forward. And I was like, probably a couple people will show up. It'll be fine. And we'd set up like these little pop-up tents everywhere. And people started showing up in the rain with their umbrellas and their raincoats. And we were like, wow. this is so great. And then more people showed up and more people showed up, and it was raining, like, and people were having to huddle like under the tents at the time. And it was just so amazing to me. And it really invigorated my soul to see that people were willing to come out here in the rain, to like huddle next to people they didn't necessarily know, just to celebrate the community that we've created here. And yeah, that has definitely been the biggest thing for me, is creating this community of people who, care about the farm, care about the earth, and care about other people.
That's awesome. You mentioned being hyperlocal. Can you just like define what that means and what like impact that has on like creating these communities?
There may be an academic definition for it somewhere, but I think, in terms of what I mean when I say that, because local can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Regional can be local, right? But we really talk about like places you can get to without a vehicle, without a gas-powered vehicle. And not that we don't have people who are part of our community who have to drive here. Like there definitely are those people. But when you talk about sustainable communities and the idea of people, putting down roots, it wasn't that long ago that people lived in the places where they were born, where their parents were born, where their grandparents were born, where their great 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 grandparents were born, right? You know, there and now we are definitely more of this mobile community, and we, go from place to place, and the privilege of being able to do that is wonderful. But at the same time, it's really difficult, because how do we build that community and build it, somewhat quickly, but in a way that is also sustainable? And I think the way we do that is by having spaces just like this that are free and open and come DIY, ready to go community. You walk in and it doesn't matter, where you came from or who you are or what your background is, but you are here and you are welcome. And for, I think, a lot of people, that used to be a little bit more church center. That was the place where people could just immediately plug in. But, even here in this area, you can't walk very far without seeing a church either boarded up or reused, or refurbished or turned into something else. And, people are still looking for that type of space.
So I guess kind of my last question is, what do you see the future of Unearthing? Like, where do you guys want to go? I mean, maybe expanding markets, but like how, and maybe more locations, but like what else? How do you guys want to better like expand your mission?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do, and I'd mentioned to you a little bit earlier, I am in grad school. I'm finishing up my master's in May. A lot of my research is focused around kind of these urban food systems and how we rethink the way we feed people as a society. And I think a big part of that is making a model that is replicable. And so that's one of the things that my research, is using GIS, identifying areas that could potentially be a good fit for a model like this. So you have to be able to identify like the spaces where need and amenities and topographical, needs kind of intersect. And then, putting that together and being able to kind of put our story and our lessons learned in a package that people can then, use to go and hopefully do what we've done, but do it a little bit smarter, better, more efficiently, and take the lessons learned so they don't have to learn those lessons the hard way, kind of like we did. Ideally, we would be funded to the point that we could have weekly markets, that we could consistently have a larger food fridge available, for people, that we could have, weekly, volunteer opportunities. I mean, all of that takes time, space, money, hours. And so that's really what we're focusing on in the more of the short term. But in the long term, yeah, we would love to see unearthing farms, maybe all over the metro area and maybe all over the country.
So that concludes the formal interview portion of this episode. These last 20 minutes or so, Katie walks me through the farm. They have really cute baby goats, so I recommend either watching this on Spotify or YouTube if you're not there already. But you can also just continue listening as Katie talks about carbon negative composting, the farm stewards, and best egg practices. I'm leaving this section a little bit more raw and uncut so you get a better feel for the space, so enjoy.
So we have these amazing little steps that you can go down. It's a stream-fed creek. We've done a ton. We've taken about, we estimate about 6 tons of trash out of our section of this creek.
Really?
Since we've been here. But of course, stuff still keeps coming a little bit. Oh, look, there's a chair rail.
6 tons is a lot.
Yeah, my husband and brother-in-law pulled out a tire that was about 700 pounds.
Wow.
Well, I mean, we used a tractor too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just them. But they had to help the tractor because the tractor was going up on one side. So this berm is definitely not, I shouldn't say definitely, more than likely not natural. There's definitely, you can see here, there's a large gray water sewer line that runs under here. And we have several different access points on the farm. So we assume at some point they had planned to develop this. But it's completely undevelopable at this point. You cannot use it for commercial or residential.
Did they plan to develop it before it was designated as the floodway?
Yeah, so FEMA came by in 2013. It was actually about a month after I bought my home. And redrew the flood maps in this area. And really, the reality is that none of this should be here. There's not enough permeable surface in this valley, especially if you look across the street. There's a floor and decor there, and it's kind of sunken down. That should not be there. Some of the things that were done historically in this valley were just not really good for the environment. And so what they did is they went through and they drew everything in this valley that didn't already have something built on it. They kind of drew a line around it and designated it all a floodway. So even so on this side of the driveway, because the driveway is actually owned by Edgewood Church over there. So on this side of the driveway is the Unearthing property. On the other side, Edgewood Church has a large front lawn that's open. They could not build anything there. So, yeah. This is our outdoor classroom area. We kind of are in the process of revamping this. We're wanting to do an education garden over here with raised beds. We generally don't put edible gardens over on this side of this berm just for flooding purposes, but we would be interested in doing some actually raised beds up on this side and providing some education. It's also pretty shady here, so we have to be a little cautious about what we can actually grow here. Everything over here on this side, kind of the berm, and you can see Thomas is kind of doing a little bit of dirt work over there to try and dig out some of the rock, and we're going to bring in some fill and some compost to make it more cultivatable. So we're planning to do a few different specific beds up on top of the berm, but then everything between the berm and this path is all for facilitating native plants and specifically, not necessarily edible plants, but different things that might help with pollinators, that might help with wildlife, things like that. And then we kind of get to this part of the farm, which is a little bit, I call this part your trash is our treasure island. It started because we had so much stuff that we found on the farm. And of course, some of it, we would take and get recycled or whatnot. But then some of it, we're like, well, we could probably use that. And so we started making piles. This is actually one of our community partners here. He's actually has his own property that he's going to be moving his operation to, but he does composting. And he provides a composting service where he picks people's compost up on bicycle. So it's like carbon net negative. But, what we want to do is provide space for people to do things that, maybe, for farmers, like just getting started, who are trying to learn about farming, etc. And then over on this side is right now where we keep our open air composting area. So anything that we pull from the farm in terms of like weeds and whatnot, we actually just put in piles over here, and then we turn those piles with the tractor a few times a year. And that way we're able to keep like some of our waste just on site. So, the goal is, again, to just keep everything as much as possible on site. This right here is so interesting the way this looks right now, because if you come back in like 2 or 3 weeks, it'll look completely different. This is all kind of native wildlife and paths. So when we were, dealing with taking all the kind of stuff off the property, the really only place where we had issues with, the soil not being like good or whatnot was right near Memorial Drive, because people were dumping so much stuff. And so the purpose of this is to kind of remediate some of these soil issues up here, using native plants, and to, again, we kind of create like this wildflower and wild bush thicket, if you will. It also provides us with a little bit of noise protection from the road, and kind of gives it that filter. When this is all grown in, the road noise on the farm is a lot less. So then we have 3 fields that we cultivate with our stewards. So this is our south field. So the rows kind of go this way. These are like shorter rows that we cultivate. So everybody has, 1 or 2 potential rows that are assigned to them. People can grow really anything they want. Again, like we just have a general agreement about, type of farming practices, not using pesticides and herbicides that are non-organic.
Well, something we didn't quite get to in the interview is who are the stewards?
Yeah. So in order to be a steward, you apply. Really originally when the farm kind of transitioned from being backed by the apartment complex's foundation to being truly a community run farm with its own 501c3, we had this kind of immediate shift where we're like, oh gosh, we need to make sure that this land continues to be cultivated, or else we're going to lose all of the work that we've done over the past year and a half. And we have no money to do that. So we had to transition from a model where we paid farmers to come and cultivate the land to a model where we offered the land for free to people who were farming to come and cultivate the land. And that is kind of how the stewardship model was born. And we've continued that, in a different way, now, because we've become so, I guess, popular. I can't say popular without saying it anymore. We have, more people who want to cultivate the land than land that we have to cultivate. And so essentially we offer the stewardship model on a very, very low buy-in process. I think we're at like $50 for the entire year, something to that degree, and we offer people as an alternative to that to do like a certain amount of volunteer work to cover that. But so people apply, and our goal when we're selecting stewards is to give preference to historically marginalized people that are part of historically marginalized communities, as well as to have, again, a really good mix of people who are really experienced in farming, have a really like strong background, people who may have some background, but, definitely somewhere in the middle, and then people who are just starting out. And specifically, one of the Cheryl, who was one of our farmers who was just here, I love her story. She actually was a woman, she is a woman who works here in Atlanta. I think she's in like finance or some kind of other industry, and has inherited some family property that used to be farmland and is no longer active farmland. And so like in her retirement, she would love to like turn that back into a working farm, but she doesn't have farm experience. So her being able to come here to get some farm experience, to understand like what grows well, what doesn't grow well, and also be in community with all these other people who are both like at her level and those who have a lot more experience than her, to help her figure out what works best, is really helpful. So that is the type of thing that we want to facilitate, almost like a farmer incubator program.
That's cool.
And then, of course, we have here, this is my part of the farm that I do, because I do not do the actual farming. I do animal husbandry, which is a type of farming. I don't want to say it's not a type of farming, okay? But it's a little bit different. A lot of times it's a little bit of a every day is something else. Okay, let me get some feed here. Check, 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 check. 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 Check, 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 check. Oh boy. Oh boy. Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. So these are new. They just came yesterday.
The baby goats?
Yeah.
Yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. An egg.
Blue egg. Yeah, good girl. I don't know. Is this yours, or is this some of this was actually? I know this one isn't yours, but because of the color. Anyway, hey, hi. Hey, hi. Hi. Yeah. See, that's what the front pocket's for.
For eggs.
Yeah.
Do you guys collect their eggs then, and then
Yeah.
like
That's part of the things that we
cultivate?
we sell. Yeah. Yeah, these are my babies. We have volunteers who come and help feed and take care of them every day.
Yeah.
So
He's got words.
yeah, it's a rooster. That's a rooster too.
I was gonna the bigger the fluffy one over there?
Yeah. He's a silky rooster.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a rooster.
Is that one also a rooster?
Yeah. So usually you can tell roosters by a couple things. Usually their wattles are quite are larger than the hens.
Yeah.
And their combs are a little bit larger. And then the telltale sign is their tail. See how the feathers go up and curve over?
Yeah.
That's a rooster right there. And then of course the big thing is we usually don't know, because before you can see all of that, usually the first sign is when they cock-a-doodle-doo. Yeah, so like this, we hatched out like this guy. Well, most of our roosters that we have are ones that we hatched out ourselves, and because you don't get roosters. You don't buy roosters. They, we sit there and we call them pullets, until they show themselves as, because we're wishful thinking. Because we would love for them all to be hens,
Yeah.
but ultimately they end up, a certain portion of them end up being roosters.
Yeah.
So. And see, this guy is like an Americana mix, because you can tell because he's got this beard right here. So a lot of our chickens here are not like purebreds, like one thing or the other. They're usually what we call like a barnyard mix. I prefer that way. I like for our chickens to all have kind of different coloring, because it helps us identify and be able to tell the difference between certain chickens.
Yeah.
Of course, chickens change their coloring from year to year too, a little bit. And they definitely change their coloring as they're growing up. Yeah, it's it's all part of the process, if you will. Yeah. Good job, guys. I'll put this egg back, because a lot of times if you put the eggs in there, that encourages them to continue to lay.
Yeah.
So we want to get at least like 8 or 9 eggs. We got some new baby chicks that should be coming any day now that are being hatched out, and then we have another order coming in June. So
wow.
we'll have baby chicks for most of this spring and summer. Yeah, we have 2 pigs. I think we have like 15, 16 chickens right now. As of earlier this week, we have 3 bunnies. We had an unauthorized drop-off.
Oh.
We had 2. Oh, look, you can see her right here.
Hiding.
She just moved. She's a little bun. Bunnies are nocturnal by nature, so you don't see them as much during the day as you do like in the morning and in the evenings. And so, yeah, here is our fridge area. So I've been touching chickens, so I don't want to touch anything. As you can see right now, we have lettuce. It looks like we have some kale back there, some apples and cabbages. Yeah, definitely need. And then some potatoes in the bottom, and then people can use the different, we have like our Zelle, our donor box, our PayPal. So if people want to, donate, they're able to do that. And then it just kind of explains a little bit here. And then usually we have, looks like somebody dropped off some donations. We have like our filtered water, a little tea kettle here, and usually some different donated teas. So if people are here, and this is my daughter's. It's not supposed to be there. So if people are here hanging out, they can make themselves a cup of tea. So, hi. Yeah, it's kind of our little piece of heaven. I will say one last thing is that, like, it's really easy in times like these to get really overwhelmed and to think like, what can like one person do in the face of all of this? And I would just say, like, start as close to home as humanly possible. And you can do a lot if you just start in your own backyard.
I'd like to thank Katie for taking the time to be interviewed and showing me around the farm. If you'd like to connect with Unearthing, their information will be in the description. If you're on Spotify or YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment about the most enlightening part of this interview, and I will see all of you guys in the next episode.